ready to really dig into this whole Harry and Meghan thing with Oprah. We're diving into Andrew Tate's take on it, and
Oh, it's a wild one.
it really is. He doesn't hold back at all, saying right out the gate that he's going to lay out what was really, really happening behind the scenes.
So listeners should know right away.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be looking at the way HE breaks this down. Not that we're saying he's right. We're just using it to sort of see how narratives work, right?
Exactly. It's a lens.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to look through this lens because he positions himself as this expert at seeing through, the BS, the hidden messages behind everything.
Which is, that's like catnip for people, right? In this day and age.
Totally. Everyone's
looking for someone to be like, I see what's really going on.
Yeah, exactly. And he starts, one of the first things he does is he takes this fairy tale image most people had of the royal wedding. What was it? 2 billion people watched that?
Oh, it's something crazy like that.
Insane. 2 billion people. And he's like, nope, I'm going to show you what it really was.
And that's such a great starting point because you have this huge contrast, right? Billions of people saw a fairy tale, but were they being tricked? At least according to Tate.
So how does he back that up? What's his evidence?
He goes right for the language Meghan uses. Specifically the word, whenever she says she was naive.
Okay, interesting.
And this is what I find so fascinating about his whole take. He claims she's not just tossing that word around, he thinks it's calculated. She's trying to make herself seem like the victim by using that specific word.
So he's saying she's playing, a strategic game.
100%. He even compares it to chess, where every word is a strategic move.
Wow.
He's basically implying that these little, almost throwaway words, they're all building up to this bigger story she's trying to tell. One where she comes out on top.
I gotta be honest, I don't know if I'm quite following that. How is naive strategic? I don't...
Okay, so think about the image it puts in your head. If you say you are naive about something, it kind of suggests you're unprepared, maybe even a little misled.
Right.
It gives off this vibe of being innocent, even when you're, on this massive world stage.
Right. Okay, so it's about, like we were saying before, it's about controlling how people see the situation.
Exactly. And Tate thinks this whole naive thing, it's like a pattern with her. He uses her reaction to royal protocol as another example.
Oh, right, the bowing thing?
Yeah, she was supposedly surprised she had to bow to the queen, even in private.
Yeah.
And Tate's interpretation is that wasn't being naive, that was being calculated. Almost arrogant, even.
So he's saying she's trying to come across as relatable, sympathetic, oh, poor me, I was so out of my element.
Exactly. He's saying she's downplaying how much she knew about the royals, so people see her as a fish out of water,
Thrown in head first and had no idea what she was in for.
And then that way, when she says bad things about the royal family, it sounds more believable. She's justified because she was this innocent bystander or whatever.
Interesting. But isn't that something that a lot of people in the public eye do? I'm thinking about politicians, even celebrities.
Oh, for sure.
They're all trying to shape how we see them.
It's all image management, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you agree with how Tate's analyzing Meghan, you have to admit it makes you think about how intentional all of these choices are,
For sure. It really makes you wonder how much of what we see, on TV or reading these interviews, how much of it is really them and how much of it's completely calculated.
That's the question, isn't it?
Okay, so we've got this naive thing going on, but Tate doesn't stop there. He goes on to question how Meghan said she didn't research Harry or the royals ATAL before they got serious.
And then it's a bold move from Meghan, I have to say. Come on, who does that? Especially someone, as ambitious as Meghan. It doesn't really make sense.
He's basically calling her out, right?
Oh, yeah. He's it's almost arrogant to think she wouldn't at least try to understand what she was getting into. Marrying a prince, that's a whole thing.
It's you can't have it both ways, right? You can't say, oh, I was so naive, I had no idea, but then also be yeah, I dove headfirst into this giant royal wedding.
Right. Tate's trying to show that her actions don't line up with her words. There's this disconnect between the image and the reality.
Which brings us back to this whole narrative thing we were talking about.
Totally. He thinks she's crafting this whole victim story on purpose.
Because if she's the victim, then whatever she says about the royals seems more justified. Is that...
Yes. She was totally unprepared and just thrown to the wolves. But the thing is, he's saying she's controlling this whole story.
Not just by what she says, but by what she, leaves out.
Exactly. And that is huge EE when you think about, How we see the media, how we believe interviews, we rely on people to tell us everything, and they can totally manipulate that, right?
It's true. We only know what they tell us.
Exactly. And this leads into another big point Tate makes, the whole thing with Archie's title and their security detail. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Meghan told Oprah there were, quote, no explanations for why they made those decisions.
And Kate is like, nope, I don't believe it for a second. He's completely convinced that there had to be talks behind the scenes, explanations, arguments, you name it.
So he thinks she's leaving that part out to make the royals look bad.
100%. Like they were being uncaring, maybe even prejudiced.
And he even throws out some possible reasons why they might have made those decisions.
He does, and it's pretty classic Tate, like going straight for the jugular. He basically says maybe they were worried about how outspoken Meghan was.
Because she was criticizing them.
Exactly. He thinks those concerns, even if nobody said them out loud, probably played a part in it.
He always assumes the most confrontational interpretation of everything, doesn't he?
For sure. But it makes you wonder, what aren't we seeing? Even if you don't agree with him, you have to admit it's a good question. 100%.
Yeah.
Tate's whole approach is about being skeptical. You can't just take things at face value. You have to look for the inconsistencies, the stuff people aren't saying.
And that's something we could all probably benefit from, right? No matter what you believe or who you agree with.
Totally.
Right.
We live in a world with so much information. Being able to think critically about it, that's important. And that's what Tate's getting at, in his own way.
So even if we think his conclusions about Meghan are a stretch, his whole analysis is still pretty insightful.
For sure. He's showing us how much power language has, how people use it to persuade, to get what they want. And that's important to understand.
It's almost like he's saying we need to be more, I don't know, like savvy about the information we take in.
Yeah, and that's a big part of his whole thing, right? He thinks people are way too quick to just accept what they hear, especially women. Yeah, that's like his whole deal. He says they're not thinking critically enough. They get swept up in the emotion of it all and, like, forget to use logic.
Huh. Well, whether you agree with him about women or not, I mean, I do think you have a point about how we process information, like as a society.
Oh, absolutely. This whole thing with Meghan, it brings up some really uncomfortable questions about power, about manipulation, about the stories we tell ourselves and other people tell about us, you know? Like, are we really in control of our own narratives? Or are we being played?
Right, right. It's pretty deep when you think about it like that.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, how does Tate really see Meghan? He basically thinks she's unhappy, manipulative, and, like, never takes responsibility for her own actions.
So he really does think she's putting on an act this whole time.
He paints this picture of her going into it with these totally unrealistic expectations. Like, she had no clue about the realities of royal life, the limitations, and then when things didn't go her way, she was like, time to play the victim card.
And use, like we were saying, her media skills to control the narrative, right?
Exactly. She knows how to work the system. Or at least that's how Tate sees it.
Which, I mean, again, whether or not you believe all that, it's definitely an interesting way to look at it. Makes you question everything.
100%. It's like that saying, everyone's got an agenda, you know?
Oh, totally.
And Tate would say that understanding those agendas, the stuff people aren't saying out loud, that's how you see what's really going on.
Makes you want to, like, rewatch the whole interview and see if you can pick up on those little cues, those signals.
Right. Like, is she saying that because she actually believes it? Or because it fits with the story she's trying to tell?
So even if we don't buy everything Tate's saying about Meghan specifically, there's still a lot we can take away from his approach.
Totally. At the end of the day, it's about being more critical of the stories we're being told. Not just about celebrities, but in every part of our lives.
Asking ourselves, who benefits from this narrative? What are they not saying? That's something we could all stand to do a little more of. Well, that was a wild ride, listeners. We went deep on Andrew Tate's analysis of the Harry and Meghan interview, and whether you agree with him or not, he definitely makes you think. Remember, question everything, look for those hidden agendas, and don't be afraid to draw your own conclusions. Until next time.